Leading a frontal assault on the lies of the New World Order. It's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
Thank you for joining us, my friends. You're listening to a Sunday, the 29th day of August, 2010 transmission. We're going to be here for the next 2 hours. Congressman Ron Paul is coming up in the next segment on a host of issues. And then later in the hour, we're going to have World Affairs Brief analyst and editor Joel Skousen joining us with a lot of key information. And we've also got some other guests lined up towards the end of the second hour today. But I wanted to point something out of the gates. Ron Paul, 30-plus years ago, traveled the United States and talked about fractional reserve banking, the fiat money system. He warned about really proto-derivatives before those even existed, and how this was a form of counterfeiting, and that it was going to destroy our financial infrastructure and create a black hole that was impossible to escape from. And I wanted to go back to an article that came out earlier last week out of Bloomberg. Morgan Stanley says government defaults inevitable. Investors will face defaults on government bonds given the burden of aging populations and the difficulty of securing more tax revenue, according to Morgan Stanley. Inevitable. They're saying it's inevitable. And, of course, there's a congressional report coming out saying the exact same thing. It's impossible. They have created 1.5 quadrillion, 1,500 trillion in fake derivatives. The Washington Post says 600 trillion. But when you're talking about hundreds of trillions, it really doesn't matter if it's hundreds or thousands of trillions. The point is, it's a complete fraud. And that's why they want their world government. That's why they want these new funding mechanisms. The IMF has now come out with a new report, even naming its new global currency that it wants. It'll be backed up with carbon taxes. It continues in Bloomberg. Governments will impose a loss on some of their stakeholders. Arnond Mars, an executive director of Morgan Stanley in London, wrote in a research report today, the question is not whether they will renege on their promises, but rather upon which of their promises they will renege on and what form the default will take. The sovereign debt crisis is global, and it's not over, the report said. And they're talking about raiding Social Security, raising the retirement age, going after state pension funds, public and private. And there is not enough money in the universe to pay this back. It would only pay off a fraction of this fraudulent debt if they took all of your bank account money, all of your savings, increased your taxes, everything, all of your pensions. You cannot pay it back. So they're going to hold you hostage and say, well, we can fix it and you can still get part of your Social Security and part of your pension if you just let us raise taxes. Meanwhile, local governments are imploding and falling in on themselves. USA Today, of course, finally reporting on what we've been talking about for more than 6 months. Headline, cutbacks force police to curtail calls for some crimes. And you've seen, of course, Oakland and other areas saying they won't respond to robbery and grand theft and home invasions. But the taxes go up and up and up as almost all the money now converts from real services to interest on the debt to these bankers, just like Argentina, just like Nigeria, just like Rhodesia, just like Zimbabwe today. It's the same story. Budget cuts are forcing police around the country to stop responding to fraud, burglary, and theft calls as officers focus limited resources on violent crime. And then they go through cuts in Tulsa, Norton, Massachusetts, Oakland, California, and hundreds of small cities and towns. In some cases, are laying off more than half their officers. In Tulsa, they're going from 110 they're cutting 110 from 739. And the police are still going to be out there generating revenue. In fact, they're saying that's their new focus. That's what they are now intensifying and pushing for. Congressman Ron Paul coming up on this August 29, 2010 edition. Then Joel Skousen and more. Stay with us. until the end of the hour. We're joined by Congressman Ron Paul, Dr. Paul. Of course, his son is still got a healthy lead against the Democratic candidate there in Kentucky and needs your support. We'll talk a little bit about the hoaxes. There's 5 of them we've counted that have been run, but we're mainly going to focus on the Iran situation, the economy, and so much more. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So much is happening, and you're always nice to join us each month. I've got all my questions, but for you, Congressman, what is most important on your radar right now you'd like to talk about?
Well, I don't think anything is new. I keep talking about the same issue. The bold and broad issue, of course, is liberty, and then I deal so much in foreign policy. We don't talk enough about foreign policy. They are talking about domestic policy and the debt, and that's very good, and that's what the election seems to be about. But according to the polls, they say that nobody cares about these wars, but I have a little trouble believing that because it shouldn't take much of a leap for people to understand that running an empire and spending all this money is very detrimental to our economy. So that's high on my agenda, and of course the economic situation and how they're making it much worse. Hopefully I can get as much interested in trying to allow people to opt out of the system with competing currencies, because I think we're getting much closer to a currency crisis, and if people would only have that option to get out, and it's encouraging news to know that the Indonesians are now looking toward hard money, and maybe we'll put some pressure on Western nations as well.
Because if we went to hard money or a hard money-backed currency, that would take the power away from the central banks to basically build up their power at the expense of the real free market?
Yeah, that's right. I don't think you have to, by force, be able to have the political power to go in and close down the Fed. That's not going to happen soon, but they can self-destruct. What we have to do is educate people to know what the other alternative is and an option to do it. That's why I really fear it when people try to use constitutional money, silver and gold coins. You know, they can end up in prison or harassed to death or fined to death. And yet that is the answer. Why should they fear it? They fear it because they want power, and the special interests have power when they can print the money and control it and make sure the people suffer the consequences of the inflation.
Congressman, looking at foreign policy, you've talked about sanctions on Iran being an act of war under international law and our own law. And now we've got Bolton, the former ambassador from the United States to the UN, saying we've got to hit them by the 21st. That's just 3 days away, or they're going to fuel the reactor. We've got the Gulf states lining up now in support of an attack on Iran. Our government had lied the last 3 years and said we don't have contractors or troops in Pakistan. They now admit that they are there. They're now trying to hype up an increased conflict, not just with Iran, but Pakistan. Can you speak directly to the war clouds that are gathering over Iran and Pakistan?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in the neocon camp. That's all they agitate for. They think that's the only solution for the mess that actually the West has created. The European as well as the West, including us, have created this mess. And they're determined to, move in that direction. I keep, hoping and praying that they're not successful and they're not about to be so stupid as to bomb Iran, but they're liable to, and that is going to be a major, major catastrophe. And I think the argument is still going on. I don't think the plans have been laid. I doubt if it'll happen the next 3 days or next month for that matter, but that doesn't mean the issue is going to go away.
Do you agree that we're moving towards a green lighting? Because many of the experts we interview concur that the war drums are intensifying and that the propaganda mechanisms, the very same neocons that promoted fictional WMDs in Iraq in 2002, 2003 are right back at it?
I don't know that answer because I'm not on the inside. I still think there's some disagreements going on, and it's not. If they had been unified on this, Bush would have done it. So obviously there's two arguments even among the radical neocons and the other ones that are less radical. I think it's still going on, and I think reality sets in too. There has to be some military people people who are really worried about this. They, what are they going to fight a war with? What happens? They had these war games where they theoretically bombed Iran, and the consequence was it would be a disaster for us. So there's military people arguing against this as well. So some of the outrageous politicians are arguing go in and bomb. Other people who have a little bit more common sense. Economic conditions are such that where are they going to get the troops and where are they going to get the money? And that's all we need right now is more of this. So I think the debate is still going on, and I certainly don't have the answer on exactly when. But I know there's a lot of people there who would like to do it. People like Bolton, they're going to agitate until they have their way. Hopefully they don't win this fight.
Well, Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic, who pushed some of the key disinfo on Iraqi WMDs, he's back, and they're putting him on television, and he's writing for The New Atlantic. But at the same time, I 3 weeks ago saw the Financial Times of London with top Clinton advisor and also Obama advisor Robert Shapiro saying, if we don't have another Oklahoma City or 9/11 to make Obama look strong, we're going to probably lose the House and the Senate. And then now other neocons are openly writing articles saying, Obama, attack Iran, we'll back you, you'll get political support. So a lot of people I'm talking to and are really concerned that Obama may back an Israeli strike or even a U.S. strike in the short term to have the people rally around him as some type of October surprise.
Well, I guess it's a possibility, but like I said, I don't know the answer to that. I think our job is to point out the great dangers and at least, explain to many of our friends in the conservative movement that, the typical conservatives shouldn't be endorsing illegal, unconstitutional wars of aggression, and I think that should be our job. And I just can't say that I can either alter the future nor know the future, but I do know what our obligations ought to be.
Looking at the economy, many economists are saying we're really in a depression if you look at the old standards of economic analysis, but that there's a lot of cooking of the books now. Now the mainstream media is saying, okay, it's a double dip recession. They're talking about the Federal Reserve putting out trillions of more dollars the taxpayers will have to pay back. Congressman Paul studying the economy and being very accurate in predicting what happened in 2008 and that the stimulus would not work in the last year and a half. What is your economic prognosis for the United States?
Well, I don't talk about double dips because I don't think the economy ever really recovered. Everything that said the economy was recovering were artificial statistics coming from the government. Let's say they give a tremendous tax credit for somebody to refinance their house or buy a house, and then there's a little blip upwards. They spend a couple $1 trillion, and that translates into $100 billion or so of GDP increase. I mean, what does that mean? The cost was 10 times more than the GDP increase. So they talk about a recovery, a weak recovery, and now there's going to be a double dip. I think if we were honest with ourselves, we would say we started slipping nearly 10 years ago, in the year 2000, when the NASDAQ bubble collapsed. Good jobs went overseas. We've lost jobs that never came back over that whole decade. Things got much, much worse after the last crisis hit in 2008. And I think it's a continuation of downhill for us. And since they're doing all the same things that they did to put us into this crisis, we can expect this economy to get much worse. The American people are going to be a lot poorer, and they're only going to have the printing press to look to. They're going to keep printing money, and that's going to precipitate the dollar crisis, and that'll be a political crisis. That's when we better have our ducks lined up so that we know you have enough allies to replace the system we have today with a constitutional system, sound money, free markets, private property rights, all the things that we believe in. But that is coming. But once again, you don't know when. Now, we were just talking about the Iranian situation. If next week they go ahead and bomb Iran and the oil prices double or triple and one of our ships gets sunk, that war would spread rather quickly. That would be a whole new ballgame and may be what would collapse the dollar.